The founding fathers completely envisioned Donald Trump. They knew Donald Trump would come along. They didn't know his name, but they knew he would come along. What they didn't envision, and actually what they built into the Constitution, was a Congress that was jealous for its own power and wouldn't allow him to rule. And that Congress has flipped over.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Meidas Touch Network. No news clip to kick off today's conversation because my guest, Adam Kinzinger, makes his own news. The new film, The Last Republican, released by Meidas Studios, is out now. It is a gripping account of Adam's courageous stand against Donald Trump and against his own party for refusing to confront the dangers of Trumpism. The timing for this film could not be better because the Trump movement is on its heels. Last week's electoral rout of Republicans across the board was a total repudiation of Donald Trump. And if you didn't see this yet, check out this clip from Trump's appearance at the Commanders-Lions game over the weekend. Those were boos, reportedly for a solid 2 minutes at an NFL game. Everything is pointing to America finally waking up to the disaster that Donald Trump has been for all of us. Adam Kinzinger, of course, was one of the only Republicans to call that out after January 6th and stick to his guns. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. We've got Adam Kinzinger with us today. I would normally say he needs no introduction, but Adam, you have a new line on your resume now, movie star. Can you tell us about The Last Republican? Because it's even surprised me. And this is a Meidas Studios production. We've been pushing it out everywhere. Our second #1 hit in 3 years. It is topping the charts at Apple. It is leapt past. I mean, you probably know better than I do, like the movies it's beating. Mm-hmm. People want to watch this.
Yeah, they do. And listen, let me just say what's awesome about this, too, is it's like being put out in a sort of non-traditional way with Meidas. And that's really essential that this be successful. And it has been so far because, as you know, Ken, like there's so much pressure out there. People are scared of Trump. They're scared of, we don't want to make anybody mad. And so they're self-censoring. And how do you get around that self-censor? Well, if you don't have the capability to do it, you don't. But if you have something like, Meidas Touch Studios, then you can. And that's what this has been able to do, is to get around those censors and really get an important film out. And that's the thing about this, is it's not a documentary about January 6th per se, although it is. It's also got a lot of human element. So there's, this interaction between me and the director, Steve Pink. And then it also shows a lot of the human aspect of, frankly, what my family and I went through after January 6th. And I think it's an important, even if you don't care about politics, which obviously everybody watching does, but if you don't care about politics, it still is I think, important lesson for what it means to kind of stand up and what do you expect? What's the cost? And so I think that's why it's been so successful, is not just revisiting January 6th, but also there's that multi-layered dimension on it. And it's kind of funny. It's actually a funny film.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, you would think that any treatment of January 6th would leave you after 90 minutes feeling terrible about yourself and terrible about America. But you and Steve have this rapport. I understand it's grown over time into a real friendship. You have this rapport. He has this movie making style, I am sure, derivative of like his comedy stuff, that makes it fun to watch. I mean, it is a funny movie about a terrifying subject.
Yeah, so MCDC, it's the Media Courthouse Documentary Collective. So it's kind of led by Kevin Morris. And then there's all these other folks that some have experience in documentaries, some don't. Steve was one of them that didn't, but he wanted to do them. And so he kind of came into this thing blind. Like, he knows how to tell actors what to do and tell them to be funny. What he didn't know how to do is capture events and capture real human emotions, right, that are happening at that moment. And he did a great job of it. And the funny thing about it is we teased each other immediately, because I would call him basically a communist. He'd call me Attila the Hun, right, even though I'm centrist. But, we would just rip on each other. And that like, it reminded me what I think is important for people to know, which is, look, outside of somebody who's truly like an insurrectionist and autocrat, right? But of the people that believe in democracy and kind of are on this spectrum of what they believe politically, like, you should not pick your friends based on what they believe politically. You should pick your friends based on who you like to hang out with. And what this shows me is Steve Pink and I love to hang out with each other. We enjoy each other's company. We probably don't agree on a ton. We agree on some, but we don't care. And I think that's important to get back to that understanding that, like, look, democracy is actually all about hosting a certain number of people that disagree. Otherwise, we don't need it. Otherwise, we could have a dictator if we just all believe the same thing.
I want to get to some news of the day, but before we do, I want to roll the 60-second teaser for the film, because I think if people see this, they are going to go watch it. It's so good, and the film is even better. Here's the reel.
I recognize you have contempt for what I believe.
You voted with the president 93% of the time, so...
First of all, it's kind of mean that you would think I would have contempt for your views.
Do you have contempt for my views, Steve?
So let me ask you, how does one even become a Republican? Because, like, I don't know, I don't get it.
You know, my parents were Republicans. Ronald Reagan was president. You probably hated Reagan.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
still
I
hate
mean,
him.
it's Ronald Reagan. It's not about a political view. It's about what it is to turn against everything you've ever belonged to because of some red line you can't cross.
The January 6th committee has already blown it.
How does it feel to be a pariah within your own party?
We're going to get you. Coming to your house, son.
Oaths matter. Truth matters.
When I was describing this film to my 16-year-old daughter, Adam, I mentioned The Last Republican. She knows a little bit about you, and her immediate reaction was, is it a zombie film? Like Adam Kinzinger as Will Smith in a, I Am Legend Redux. And I laughed at first, but then I had to think about it, because the real answer is, it kind of is a zombie film. And Adam is one of the only Republicans who's immune to the virus. What is it like seeing the party that you gave so much of your life to just infected by this thing?
Well, I mean, it's disheartening. And, the reality is, why was I a Republican? Well, I believe in, like, strong national defense, the role of the federal government, so that kind of stuff, like a conservative view of federal government, but a federal government that, does really important things, including social safety nets. And over time, from my time in politics, I saw the party moving away from that and turning into ultimately then the party of Trump that is not based around any policy. It's based around a personality. And that's disappointing to me, because I truly believe that each country and each kind of democratic movement needs a left-focused movement and a right-focused movement to work together. The left pulls the country ahead when it's stagnant. The right kind of holds it back when it's moving a little too quickly. And together that simpatico has worked. There is no right-wing movement that is not now basically autocratic. So there's no conservative party left, because there's nothing that's conservative about Republicans. They're illiberal. And so watching that's been crazy. But you know what? I think back, Ken, and I'm like, this has been 10 years since Donald Trump came down the golden escalator. It still feels like yesterday, but the reality is, over 10 years, they have forced out people that stood against Trump. People have come crawling back, and they're like, accept you. This is Donald Trump's superpower. He'll accept you if you come crawling back, but he makes it clear that you can never cross me again. That's what a cult leader does. And they've just turned into a party that exists solely for Donald Trump's benefit. I mean, look, the founding fathers completely envisioned Donald Trump. They knew Donald Trump would come along. They didn't know his name, but they knew he would come along. What they didn't envision, and actually what they built into the Constitution, was a Congress that was jealous for its own power and wouldn't allow him to rule. And that Congress has flipped over. And that's what's been so dangerous to the Constitution. Trump, yes, I hate Trump. I think he's dangerous. But a aggressive Congress would be better to protect the Constitution. And that's why the Democrats have to win the Congress in a year.
Yeah. You've been making the rounds with a lot of our mutual friends. I just rewatched your Substack Live with Steve Schmidt, and you dropped a one-liner on there that I wrote down that I'm going to use a lot now. You said that Democrats are actually more conservative than Republicans. And when I think about tariffs and trade, when I think about individual liberties, watching what the Trump regime is doing with ICE, when I think about national defense, you're right. The Democratic Party, as liberal as it is, and I'm a proud Democrat, is only more conservative than the Republican Party because the Republican Party has completely surrendered any notion of principle.
I fully agree. And, probably some people hearing that are going to be like, oh my God, don't call us conservatives. Well, we're not calling you conservatives. What I'm saying is that when you have a team that has completely abandoned the field and you only have one team now. So if, Cardinals are playing the Cubs and at Wrigley and the Cardinals just go home, well, the Cubs technically then are offense and defense, right? Because there's no other team. And that's kind of where we're at. So the principles that conservatives hold dear, things like free trade, free but fair trade, and, drawing national defense and, having alliances, right, that matter. Well, the Democrats do occupy that territory. And instead of getting mad, I think Democrats look at that and go like, that's great. That gives us an opportunity with a message to say, look, you may not agree with everything. And I'm not telling Democrats to become Republicans or old school Republicans, but recognize there are people in the middle, particularly when you think of like unions and how Democrats have been losing the union vote, that would, to the right message, come screaming back to the Democratic Party. Again, it's a big tent. What does a big tent mean? It means you're going to have far left progressives and moderates, and they're not going to like each other, and they're going to do battle. But it is much better they do battle within the tent in power than outside of the tent out of power.
We saw that play out last week, and that's what I want to talk about now, because talk about a big tent. I don't think Mamdani would have had a chance in Virginia, and I'm not sure Spanberger would have had a chance in New York. But with a big tent, you get to pick candidates who fit their constituencies. What are your thoughts now, a week later, on what the Democrats pulled off last Tuesday, really across the country? Because you got to go to Prop 50 in California as well. It was a coast-to-coast blue tsunami.
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive repudiation of Trump and Republicans, period. One of the things that if you get into the numbers, I haven't seen yet how, men particularly broke, right? Because that's an area I've been concerned about, is the tendency of men to go Republican for reasons that basically have nothing to do with policy. But what we have seen is the Hispanic shift is, I think, the greatest shift we've ever seen in a year, ever. I mean, there were some counties that Donald Trump won in New Jersey that Mikey Sherrill won by 40 points with Hispanics, right? Now, is there a different electorate that votes in a year like this? Yes. But that is still indicative of a massive shift of Hispanics. And so the question is, does that translate to Texas? Does that translate to Florida? Hispanics are not a monolith, right? I don't know, but it seems pretty likely that it does. And so what you saw was this modeling on, polling is an art and a science. The art is like, hey, I think the turnout is going to be X, Y, and Z for Hispanics, X, Y, and Z for whatever. They underestimated Hispanics, the way the Hispanics would vote. And I think they had Cheryl in most of the polls winning by like 4 or 5 points, and she blew it out of the water. If I'm a Democrat, I'm extremely excited about next year, but I also would advise, do not rest. This is not the opportunity to take a deep breath. This is the opportunity to double down and have a 2010, but for Democrats in 2026.
That was part one of my conversation with Adam Kinzinger. Check out part two tomorrow, where Adam and I dive into what the results from last week's elections mean for his former party. See you then.